Hello, welcome to Movers, Shakers, Designers, Makers. I'm Steve Carpenter. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Architecture at Penn State. And today I'm talking with Heather Darcy Bhandari, who earned a Master of Fine Arts degree at Penn State in 1999. In the fall of 2019, we had the pleasure of hosting Heather on campus as one of our college alumni award winners. Now, a lot has changed in the world since then, but I've also discovered in all of these interview conversations that I've had over the past year, the work of our alumni and the work of the alumni group continues to flourish regardless of the context or the circumstances. Now, Heather's work is no exception to what I just said, and I've been looking forward to this conversation with Heather very much. Heather is an independent curator and best-selling author whose book, Art, Work, published by Simon & Schuster in 2009, was updated in 2017. This book has become a leading professional development guide for artists. Heather is also the co-founder and program director of Art World Conference, an organization producing workshops and events focused on the business and financial health of artists. I'm very pleased to introduce Heather Bhandari. Heather, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you.
Well, thanks for being here. So Heather, I've spent a good bit of time as a graduate student here at Penn State for my master's degree and doctorate degree, as I like to say, back in the 1900s.
Right.
And you know what? I realized our time as students didn't intersect, but we were both here at Penn State. I think it was more like that revolving door. I was leaving, you were coming in kind of thing. We've all had our own unique stories, where we came from and what influenced our decisions to take on an educational path. I'm interested in your path, Heather, your story. Where did you earn your undergraduate degree, and what provided you the impetus for pursuing an MFA here at Penn State?
Well, I'll take you back to the 1900s, and I went to Brown University, and as I was leaving there, I was a double major in visual arts and anthropology. And as I was leaving, a lot of my friends were not in the arts and they were getting these internships. It was that bubble in the late 90s. All these marketing internships and sales and financial stuff. And they seemed to have it all worked out. And I didn't. And I had, because I had pursued a liberal arts degree, I hadn't had the time to focus on just making my artwork. So I got really excited to get an MFA. I was like, well, this is my time. That'll be my focus. And I'll see if I really want to pursue this in the long term. And one of my professors, Wendy Edwards, knew Michaela Amato. And so she said, why don't you talk to this woman at Penn State? And honestly, Penn State afforded me this amazing opportunity, which I didn't quite realize at the time how important it was, but I left grad school debt-free. And I had a lot of debt from undergrad, but Penn State, I was able to do a teaching assistantship. I was able to meet all these different people. I was I will say Happy Valley was isolating in a good way for me. So I got to really focus, and I had some amazing professors. So that's how I ended up at Penn State, was through relationships. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's not an uncommon response. Not that everybody's response sounds exactly like yours, but it's the relationships, right? Or it's the word of mouth or the advice and the recommendations that typically lead us in good directions. So appreciate that story. Heather, during these talks, I really like to ask my guests to share their career story. You've told us your story of how you came to Penn State, but I'm interested also in your career story in a sense of, if you take the helicopter up about 30,000 feet, can you give us a sense of the landscape and your journey in your career from Penn State to what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's sort of that 30,000 foot view in a nutshell. It's that I started, making work and getting that MFA and thinking I had this vision of, being in my studio and showing in galleries. I had a very traditional view of like what an artist's life could look like.
Mhm.
And I quickly figured out that it could be a lot more than that. And those skills and that like problem solving and creativity could lead me in a lot of different directions. But I was so thrilled to have the making background. And what I've ended up doing was sort of traveling from the maker to more of a facilitator and a conduit toward toward other things for other artists. So yeah, so instead of like centering me as the maker, I've transitioned to being a facilitator for others, I guess, in a nutshell.
So was that a conscious transition for you? Did you essentially one Friday morning say, you know what, I'm going to stop being a maker as the center and then facilitate the making of for other people? Or was it more of a like how did that transition happen is really my question.
I mean, I had people look at me with a sad face when they hear me say this sometimes, but it's definitely not a sad story. But there was, I mean, it wasn't one day, it wasn't a Friday, but it was there was a time where I was in my studio and then I got a job for practical reasons. I got a job in a gallery. And that was also facilitated, by the way, through networks and relationships in Penn State and Robert Yarber. And so I owe a lot to the people that I met at Penn State. But I had a job in a gallery and I started doing studio visits with the gallery artists. And there was a moment where luckily I have some sort of, self-awareness where I went into other artist studios and I was like, oh my God, I'm enjoying this so much more than I'm enjoying my studio. Not that it's supposed to be fun and games all the time in your own studio, but I just felt like super energized by other people's work and by talking through their goals and like what they were going to do next. And when I went to my own studio, there was this tremendous like I felt differently. I felt differently. That's all. I'll just leave it at that. And so I was like, ooh, I should maybe think about this a little more and start to think about, how I can be in more artist studios. And so that led me on this career path in galleries for many years. And some of the stuff that you mentioned at the beginning came from the fact that lots of doors were open when I didn't come into the room as the artist. And I thought, well, what if I could tell the artist about what happened when I walked through that door and did say I was an artist? And so could I be a conduit of, at first it was like a conduit of information to like be the spy on the inside kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then that just developed over the years.
I like how you're discussing this transition or this realization. As you said, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a
Right.
wonderful thing because what it says to me is, and I hope this is a message for some people who are watching, that it's okay to actually, and maybe wonderful to find that there are other things that you are good at and that you
Right.
enjoy, and if you leave what you thought was, or you kind of deviate from what you thought your path was to something else, that's not bad. It actually, what you're deviating from was what got you to this new location anyway. So it's all
Right.
part of this bigger project, and it's all positive. And obviously you've demonstrated that what you sensed, that moment of self-awareness was very well positioned and in tune with what was going on.
There's this moment that just resonated with me a lot because I was really nervous about it. I will say it wasn't like this light bulb went off and then I felt really happy about my decision. I was thinking to myself, I spent all this time with these professors who put a lot of energy and, thought into me and gave me all this great feedback. And did I waste their time? Like I had
Mm.
lots of strange thoughts that went through my head, or did I waste time there? And there was a moment where I saw a professor on the street that was a Penn State professor that was walking by in Chelsea, and I was like just happened to be looking out the window talking on the phone from
Mm.
the gallery I was working at, and I hid. And because I was like, I don't know, I don't
Wait, you
want them
said
to know.
you hid. I thought you were
I
going to
hid.
say, hey, you hid. You
No,
did
I
the
hid.
opposite. Yeah.
I hid. I was like ducked down. I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God, what if they come in? What am I gonna say? Like, because I this was a moment of like the path that I thought I was on.
Mhm.
I just veered and I didn't know how to talk about it with other people, especially the ones who had put the time and the energy into me in the beginning. And then, so the next time I saw a professor, I felt a little more confident. And I said hello. And it was this professor, Tom McGovern. I don't know if you remember
I
him, but he
do.
was in sculpture. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I bumped into him at something and he said, "What are you doing?" Or that question, like, "What are you up to?" Or "What are you doing?" And I was like, and I told him, and he said, "Well, but Heather, you're leading," because I must have said it in an apologetic way. And he said, "Are you leading a creative life?" And I said, "Yes, I really am." And he's like, "Then you did it. You did it." And I
There
was
it
like,
is.
"Oh my, thank you for that. Thank you so much for that." And it made me feel so much better about like making choices that were more unexpected
That's
for me.
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. And to get that reinforcement from, from anyone is important, but someone from your formative time as a graduate student, it's even more valuable and
Yeah.
reassuring.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's continue talking about where you've gone and your career. If we rewind a couple of years to 2019, the spring of 2019 was when you held the inaugural Art World Conference in New York. Can you tell us a little bit more about what led to the creation of that conference, and why was it important to bring this kind of programming to the visual arts community?
So I had worked in between those stories and 2019. I had worked in galleries for 16 years, so commercial galleries and also nonprofit gallery toward the end of that. And so I had learned a lot. And you had mentioned before I wrote that book, Artwork,
Mhm.
and when you write a book, I was able to redo it from 2009 to 2017. I was able to do a revamp, but books take a long time to like, you have to write it, it's hard. And then the publishing. So it takes several years to actually usually get things out into the public. And I met someone named Dexter Wimberly in my curatorial life. He was also a curator. And he and I were talking about, ideas of professional development and getting more of this financial information out. And he was finding himself, and so was I, doing a lot of like one-on-one meetings with people. Or when I worked in galleries, I was able to work with the gallery roster about issues of taxes and investments and just saving, but also bigger picture ideas about, the race wealth divide and how that relates to the arts, and diversity and inclusion in the arts, and how it's really, really hard for a lot of people to enter the art world. Like I already said, I got a job in a gallery because I needed to pay my bills. Like I, it's hard to enter the art world when you don't see that sustainable path forward, or a way to pay your bills right off the bat. So, and we've both figured things out over the years. And so, and he was like, "How do I get to more people?" And I was like, "Yeah, how do I get to more people? Because it takes a long time to write a new chapter and to get it
Mhm.
actually out into the world." So we had this idea for a conference, and an ungated conference, because this kind of information is disseminated to a lot of times closed groups. Like there are some fabulous organizations out there like Creative Capital, where they're doing lots of amazing work and funding artist projects that are absolutely phenomenal. But I think there are like 9,000 people who apply for 50 spots. And so it's very hard to be part of that group that gets that sort of education. And we didn't want to be gatekeepers in that way. So we decided, like, why not a conference? And like CAA has a conference, but the art world isn't really known for conferences, especially artists, especially conferences that are designed for artists. Like that doesn't really exist so much. So we're like, let's do it. So we did one in New York, and it was very well received. And we did, larger picture about storytelling and all kinds of other topics. And then these smaller workshops to get people into the nitty gritty where they could actually ask questions. And it was so important to us. It's funny to look back, but so important to us to gather everyone in a room and feel the energy and warmth of the crowd and hug each other. And we had like a dancer who would have dance breaks for everyone in between. And it was really lovely until COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was. It
Yeah.
sounded like you were building up to something. Of course, COVID was what you were building up to. But it's interesting. COVID sends us uh, uh, to our homes or to isolation, or at least 6 feet away from everybody else, right? Um, and we realize that proximity is such an important part of our relationships. It's such an important part of what we do. And when it's taken away from us, that might be when we realize the value of what it meant to be together. So conferences should be these places where we're together. Certainly Zoom or other video conferencing allows us to interact, but there's something about the getting together that's really important. I like how you identified that, but also brought that element to your conference. So first conference 2019, you have a second one in Los Angeles in early 2020. And then there's a follow-up. So I'm interested in if you could mention a bit about that Los Angeles conference, and then if to follow up on that, I'd also like to know what might come out if if you wanted. So you've had two conferences, the 2019, the LA conference. What would be the next iteration? I'm assuming you're planning on another one, and what have you learned? Usually, first year you do something, you're on one side. Second year you make some adjustments. It's the third time you do something that you find that proper or that comfortable middle space.
Yeah. So so New York turned into LA in February of 2020. So we got in there right under the wire. February 2020, still hugging, still dancing together, doing all of that. It was really lovely. And we had plans for Chicago and another New York one later in 2020, which obviously didn't happen. We did do a virtual conference in the fall of 2020, just because we wanted to see. So, I mean, something that COVID did was for these ideas was we always had ideas of live streaming things. We always had ideas of, sort of taking down barriers to accessibility, because when you have a conference and it's live and you're in the same room feeling the energy, that's beautiful. But if you don't live in that city, or you're far away, it's also financially, even if we make the ticket free, it's financially, not possible for a lot of people who really need the information to get themselves all the way to that location and stay there, especially if it's someplace like New York or Los Angeles. So we did have plans for like Tennessee and all kinds of other places too. But we did this virtual one, and that energy was missing, I will say. It's you can create it in some aspects, you can recreate it, but overall there's this coldness to these screens. Although I love it that we can talk to each other right now. Like there's this facilitation that can happen that's great, and the accessibility barriers collapsed for a lot of people as long as you had an internet connection. It didn't even have to be that great, because you could even just listen. So the virtual, so what's going to happen now? So now we realize that all these plans that we had for the future, like it was sort of like this robotic future that distant when people would actually learn something online. It happens all of a sudden. And now we understand hopefully we understand how we can combine the two in a way that's accessible, but also has the energy. And so we're planning something in Chicago next spring, where we're going to try to combine the two. So that's going to be the moment. I don't know if that's going to, like when you said you try it twice, the third time you kind of get it right. Yeah. We're still iterating. I'd say, like, we're still like testing different variables because COVID threw so many wrenches into it. But that's what we're going to do. But something that I think we'll talk about in a minute that developed from this is another branch of what we do, which is called Art World Learning. And that's really what happened to the conferences last year. Was we tried the virtual one, but really we're like, oh, we have to dig deeper into these subjects, and also try to hit a different audience also.
Sure. Well, yeah. Maybe the third time is just every time after the second is always the third time, and you're always trying to find ways to nuance it, right?
Yeah.
So I really like how you were talking about the value of being together, the value of conferences. I do want to talk about Art World Learning, but before we do, the value of conferences, the value of making things accessible, which is what I'm picking up. The value of learning from each other. Yeah. But what have you learned so far about the value of artists in these two engagements?
Well, I mean, the whole concept is also built on, I mean, I just sort of told you the technicalities of what we were doing, but the whole actual mission of this is to sort of convey and also just what word am I trying to say? Help it to sink into artists that they're really valuable and
Got it.
that without them, the entire art world collapses. And so actually the theme of our virtual conference was value, defining value. And then we had values with the S in the parentheses at the end. Um, because while a lot of the subject matter that we're covering has to do with monetary value and commercial value and a capitalist system that we all live in, um, a lot of it boils down to also how much you're valuing yourself and how much you're valuing the work that you're creating and how much you're valuing creatives in general. And I mean, this is a big goal, but working toward it is that we want to increase the value of artists in general, artists and designers and creatives in general. And to partner, I guess that's also another part of the third iteration, like to partner with organizations who are also advocating for artists and advocating for creatives and doing the really hard work of speaking a language that finance people and government officials and all these other people actually understand, like getting data on this. Because I don't know, you and I and a lot of people in academia, there's something like quantifying an artist's value just seems a little wrong. So, or it's like not exactly, you're not really getting to the heart of like what's going on there when you quantify. But we've got to do that to sort of change policies and to change the way artists are valued. So what I see us doing through the conferences is to create a community that can potentially work together to change things. Like if we're all talking about subjects related to, how much people are getting paid, how workers are being treated, how creative workers are being treated, what the barriers are to entry to some of the things that we consider to be, these gatekeeping events that change lives. If we're talking about them really in a transparent way and we disagree with something there, like if we're all on board, maybe we can make some change. So we're trying to sort of create a coalition too of artists who really have the confidence to speak up and make change and value themselves so that others can also be valued. I don't know, that was a long way of saying something.
It was a long way of saying something very important and inspiring in that near the end there you said something about developing the sense of confidence for artists to talk about their own value. I think that's one element, not to generalize, but I think in my experiences in the arts, having the confidence to talk about your work and to promote the work that you do with value, not necessarily monetary value, but with value for what it means in the world, is difficult for many people. Certainly they can say it's important, but to talk about its value is something else. So I want to make a bit of a shift though, because I really want to get into this art world learning project. Can you tell us what art world learning is?
Sure. So it goes straight from the Art World Conference, like narrative. So we go into COVID, we had these two other conferences, in-person conferences planned, and that wasn't going to happen. So we started doing webinars that were free for artists dealing with issues that were emergencies, I guess, last March, April, May, things like housing, things like healthcare. They were all topics that we wanted to cover in the conferences, but again, they were like, oh yeah, those are important. We're going to get to them. We're going to get to them. They were like down on the list a little bit. And all of a sudden they were at the top of the list. So we started doing these webinars and having people come who were not school. They weren't in college. They weren't in grad school. They were older and they just didn't have the resources and the tools to even begin to tackle these huge life issues that they were having and really scary problems that they were having. So Dexter and I, when thinking about the future of the conference, we're like, okay, our demographics, just like our age demographic, is, like mid-20s, late 20s, all the way. We had people coming who were 80 years old, but the most of them were in their 30s and 40s. And that was a great demographic because you can really tackle a lot of financial issues because people have been through something and they totally understand what you're talking about when you talk about whereas like an 18-year-old might not quite have a grasp on it yet. But we realized if there wasn't a foundation laid and a vocabulary taught a little earlier, it was much harder for an artist who was even approaching mid-career to really have a handle on some of this stuff. So we thought, okay, let's try to. We want to offer resources to more people who are younger. We're not talking elementary school and high school. There are a lot of people, thank God, working on financial literacy for people of that age. But art school in general, art programs in general, design programs. And so we started putting a lot of the things that we thought were important or content that had been well received at the conferences onto an online platform called Art World Learning. And our mission was to get schools to subscribe to it and then offer it for free to students and potentially alumni, depending on the school and what their goals were, so that more people would have access to this information on their own time. So again, like accessibility, speaking about accessibility, to have a lot of this information online that you could access whenever you want from wherever you want. And we're adding live components this fall so that people can join and ask Q&As. But we just wanted to get more resources that spoke the language of the arts online. Because right now I could Google, taxes. I could Google, how to save. I could Google debt. But I could Google like how much you should charge per hour. But most of the time they're not speaking to an artist. And you also don't know the quality of a YouTube video, depending, unless someone's recommended it to you that you trust. Like it's very hard to find the right information. And the life of an artist is usually not understood by a lot of the people who talk about finance and personal finance. So we wanted to get people who spoke that language and understood the ups and downs and the precarity of a lot of artists' lives and be able to talk about how to make it a little less precarious and how to not just sustain, but also thrive and still be an artist. Unfortunately, I don't think Penn State did not do this to me, but I know a lot of people who went through art programs that gave them this impression that if they were thriving as an artist financially and in other ways, that maybe they were valuing the wrong things, or they were thinking, they weren't as passionate as they should be, and that they weren't giving enough back. And I think you can still thrive as an individual artist, also give things back, and also make really amazing art. So, but there are people that can help with that. And so we're trying to like facilitate that knowledge and funnel it toward an art community.
Yeah, no, sounds like a wonderful project. I'm excited about what you're talking about for a couple of reasons. Not the least of which is it sounds like what you're doing is you're tackling assumptions or myths head on, right? Assumptions and myths that not only artists or art students might have, but people in other aspects of our lives have these assumptions and myths about what artists do, what they should be, what they should think, how they might behave in certain circumstances. You're addressing those. You're making them visible, putting them up front, and you're working through them and deconstructing them, tearing them down, and creating new realities. Or maybe I shouldn't say new realities. You're saying you're creating realities that are meaningful. And it relates to something you said earlier. It's about developing confidence as well. Moving ahead to the current moment. So right now, you and I are talking in July of 2021, and this is over a year after the world turned sideways, or shut down, or whatever metaphor you want to use to talk about what the pandemic has done for us. I like to say that 10 weeks into my term as dean, things shifted. And so, a year and a half later, we're in this conversation by Zoom. The conversations that I've had with other alumni over the past year have included accounts of how they navigated their life through COVID. How have you navigated through the pandemic?
This is a very hard question because I feel like today, it just so happened today was the first day that everyone around me was wearing masks again. So I feel like it's never going to be over. Um, but I mean, it's for me, I hope this isn't a very generic answer, but for me, it's really put a lot in perspective. I have a family, also doing, have a business with a business partner. Um, I still am so incredibly dedicated to seeing artwork in person and meeting artists in person and going on studio visits in person and all of that. But I've tried to the pause that we all felt at the beginning, that scary pause, was really helpful because I did feel like I was on this a treadmill where I wasn't able to look ahead very well. I was able to look 3 steps ahead, 3 steps directly in front of me, and I never looked up. And so it was really great to have, although it was scary at the time, really great to have that moment with my family, and to sort of look out and see what I really cared about. Because all of a sudden, for anyone watching who has like children at home, like all of a sudden there was no time for like all the people who were like, I watched everything on Netflix, there's nothing left. I was like, like I wanted to just scream every time I heard that because I would have loved to have watched the entire Netflix library.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen for me. And so I was like, okay, I only have, a certain amount of time, and there are children hanging on me that during all that time. So what's really important, and where am I going to put my energy in the future? And the art world learning sort of grew out of that. It was like, where do I want to put my energy into something that can live beyond me? So I guess this is what I was talking about at the beginning. I love people who make things. I love it. And I know I'm not cut out for it, but I like pushing things out into the world and like having lots of people be able to see something where I'm not present. And so like I like knowing things that I had a hand in are like living out there by themselves. So this whole idea of like helping with this asynchronous education that all of a sudden became so important to my life and my kids' lives and lots of people's lives, and I was also teaching online too, and like how to make that better. I'm like, oh, this is sort of where I want to spend some time for a while and figure out how to optimize kind of some of the things that I've learned during COVID, during this scary COVID time. But when I look out into the world, anytime that I can do something in person now, the gratitude and appreciation I have for it is so much greater. I feel like then I took it so for granted before. I think maybe we all did. I'm not sure, some of us did. And I'm going to be more pointed in like when I'm doing all these in-person things from now on, and really be 100% present. Like I think I was in a rat race for a really long time working in galleries where every 5 weeks I had another opening. So it was kind of like this treadmill of like every 5 weeks is another opening. And I love the artist I work with. I love the shows that I made, but I never stopped and catch my breath. And so hopefully I can remember this moment and bring it into the future.
If people keep wearing masks, we're going to be able to remember things for a long time.
I know.
But more seriously,
Yeah.
what you've shared about navigating the pandemic, to me, when people use that term, sometimes they think about a ship moving forward. But I also think just being in the ship and not having it tip over is part of navigating too. And so I heard that in your response, but I also heard, or what you helped me think through is, if one day things are taken away, if they're taken away from you, what is left? What have you left in the world, or what have you done that is of value, that might be lasting, or that might have a positive influence or impact on other people. And so your response helped me think about maybe, well, that might be what the pandemic, if there's something positive that's come out. Again, there's tragedy and heartbreak and difficult
Right.
times within the pandemic. But if anything positive comes out, maybe it's helped many of us think through what is valuable, and if we are going to move forward, we'll spend our time and focus on things that might be more than just for us, might be for others as well. So
Mhm. And to like giving people tools, I think, where if you lose things, you still have, I guess it's all of us who teach, right? And I've never really thought of myself first and foremost as a teacher or an educator, like, but it's something I've done. Actually, it's funny, at Penn State, when I was the teaching assistant, I was like, never again. This is just not for me. Oh my goodness. Like, I will get through this. But this is never, I'm never coming back to this. And now I've realized it's maybe one of the most important things to me. Because that's one of the only things that can't be taken away from you, right? Like, with knowledge. And um so yeah, I'm really pretty dedicated to that at this point. The other thing I didn't mention from last year too was that when Dexter and I teamed up together, a lot of what we talked about at the beginning was a lot of diversity and inclusion stuff, and just looking out at who our colleagues were in the art world, and the backgrounds that they came from and all of that. It's like we really wanted to open it up a little bit and like open some more doors for people in any way we can. And that's such a big goal, but it was, and like, how would we actually affect change on that? We had no idea. And just having the conversation be so much more prevalent last year. I mean, there are people who've been talking about it for, ever, for hundreds of years. But having more people that we knew also, like, really checking where their priorities had been, and how they were hiring people, and where they were looking, and how they were promoting people, and if they were paying everyone the same thing, and just like all these things that we were like, how can we ever tackle this? It just seems so big and we're so small. Like, you got to see who was part of your team, I guess, last year, and like who was working toward the same thing. So again, partnerships, I think, looking to the future, are really important to us, and trying to, like, take our energy and the things that we can do well, and partner with other people who are doing other things really well, and trying to join forces to get something bigger done. So that's very vague, but it's
no,
how I
no,
feel.
that works well.
Yeah.
It's a good foundation on which I can build another direction of questions.
Sure.
You mentioned how you and Dexter were thinking about what I understand is thinking about the current moment, the current historical, social, cultural moment.
Mhm.
Again, we're here in July of 2021, and not only last year and continuing now that we have the pandemic to face, but there were other things that became more visible and more, should I say, more public, more of uh, part of more people's daily lived experiences. And by that, I mean racial injustice became more central to many conversations, political discord, police brutality, climate change. The list could continue. And so you've mentioned, we kind of opened this space, but I'm interested in what this moment means to you, not necessarily just as a curator and an artist and a facilitator, but you've also talked about you have children, and we know, or as a member of a community, whether it's your physical local community, like what does this current social and cultural moment mean in those ways?
It's a big question. I it sort of means everything. It's kind of the philosophy, just the philosophy of fairness and equity is just something that I guess it's always been a part of me, but it's being able to like say those words out loud, and having other people say them at the same time is really validating and really empowering, I think. I mean, I live in a really beautiful bubble, so which is in Brooklyn, and my kids go to public school, and this year, even though it was remote, they had like every week was a different tenet of Black Lives Matter. Like
Mhm.
we're I don't know. I'm just like living in a very aware, I guess, community, and I'll never be as aware as I need to be, I think, but I'm trying, and the people around me are trying, and I guess that's all we can actually do. So but I love that this last year has like changed the vocabulary and changed the conversation. Like even Dexter and I back, and my just speaking personally too, a lot of these ideas were always um conveyed in other language. It wasn't, we wouldn't have said racial injustice. We would have figured out some other way of saying it that was a
Oh, I
little
see.
more vague. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
More
And it's
vague and
been,
coded.
yeah, encoded.
Mhm.
And it's been very freeing, I think, for a lot of people over the last year to use the words that are actually the words we should be using, or
Mhm.
like the being more direct with the problems that we're seeing. I feel like a lot of the protests from last year, both you know, because of murder and racial injustice, but also just on every level, and pay inequity and all, like the actual words are being used now, and people are being called out in a way that is very direct, and I like that. I don't know if that answers your question, but
It does. It does. I really appreciate how you said, well, now we're actually using particular kind of vocabulary
yeah.
that we might not have been using before. And certainly, it seems like even me asking this question, right? So let's say 2, 3, 4 years ago, we had this interview.
Mhm.
This question might not have come into the conversation,
I doubt
um,
it. Yeah.
right? So, and
Yeah.
if it did, maybe vocabulary that was more vague or coded
Mhm.
would have been used, rather than us talking directly about racial injustice or white supremacy or Black
Right.
Lives Matter, right? So now
Right.
having the conversation more visible and more open, you talked about a sense of awareness, and I heard you say something to the effect that this is an ongoing project. It's not, okay,
Yeah.
now I'm aware and I'm good.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be the case for anybody,
No.
you, me, anyone else. That's just how I feel. It's
Right.
awareness is an ongoing project. We develop additional awareness as we go on. It's just like that's what learning is too, right?
Right. 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 So
It's
I
a
feel like
lifelong.
it's the beginning, or maybe the later beginning of something that's pretty exciting. I mean, if the change that we all want to have happen, changes that we want to have happen, at least the things we can see right now. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
sure there are bigger things that I can't even see at the moment. But if this trajectory continues, that's very exciting to me. And while I watch the world burn and the smoke is over the sky, like there are some things that I really feel like just me throwing my like not using a plastic water bottle is not, it's not really affecting change as quickly as I would like, or in a big way. But knowing my children are growing up with this vocabulary to begin with is super exciting and hopeful.
I agree.
When it's hard to be hopeful in some of the other, when I'm looking at a red sky.
I hear you. I agree.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I say, nothing changes until something changes,
Right. Right.
right? So
Right.
we all make something change, and bigger things will change. So, um, a bit of a shift. I mean, we've gotten to
Yeah.
some pretty heavy stuff here, but Heather, I always like to ask my guests, to look forward, uh,
Mm.
and I'm interested in being optimistic, as difficult as it might be sometimes. So, what are you optimistic about, or what developments in your work are you excited about? We've already talked about a few projects, but what are you optimistic about in your work going forward?
I do think so. Vocabulary is changing in all kinds of different arenas. And I do, what I'm seeing is I am seeing a shift in power between, I feel like when I came into the art world, I sensed, and a lot of the people around me sensed, because it was real, a a power dynamic that wasn't in favor of the artist. When it came to working with institutions, working with, small ones like galleries or large ones like museums, or even just being a freelancer and negotiating rates with different companies, or so it was art and design. And I just felt like the power wasn't with the artist. And it was mainly because we didn't have the vocabulary to ask for things. We didn't even know what we might want, to be honest. And I don't think that was just me and a couple of people I know. I think it was pretty systemic. And a lot of things have happened over the last 20 years that have, made us more aware of what can be possible. And just enough, if I feel like I'm just one of the people saying, we're equal, we should be equal. Like this is a partnership. Like an artist gallery relationship is a partnership. A curator artist relationship is a partnership. Like when you're working, this is like two equals coming together and working on something together and creating something that's bigger than both of them, right? So and I feel like there are so many more students coming out of school who understand that, like they get it. And a lot of the artists that are more my age are having a harder time with it because we're carrying so much baggage from the before times. But these Gen Zers, they're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm worth a lot. So while that can be problematic sometimes, it's great to see that confidence. It's great to see a knowledge of worth, not just self-worth, but also the worth of like the work that you're doing. And to also see, like, I'm really hopeful that there's something called social practice that's been around for a long
Yes.
time, that it was like artists doing good things for the community, and everyone's like, is that really art? Like, I don't really. And in the last like 5 to 10 years, yeah, that's really art. And like we can do great things for people and do great things for our community, and that's work. And like acknowledging it as work. Like I like to, and I keep forgetting because I'm too old to like have it come naturally, but to call myself an arts worker, because I want to acknowledge that thought process, the community engagement, all of that is actual work. It's not just like I feel like having fun by doing it. I think it's like it takes time and energy and effort to get something to happen. So anyway, I like all these shifts over the last 20 years make me super hopeful for the next 20 years. I'm really, I want to watch like what these young people do, because I'm super excited about their ideas. And I think that's one of the reasons I teach, because I love being connected to like all these new ideas. And I love saying something and having the 22-year-old or a 19-year-old say, duh, like it's so obvious that I would ask for that. And I'm like, yes, it's working. Again, there has to not, we don't go too extreme. Like we all understand experience also means a lot too, but it's really great to see people more empowered.
Well, certainly you are making efforts in the world that are helping to empower other people and contributing to the positive forward momentum. You mentioned the you say 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds. Let's focus on that age range, right? These interviews are open to all audiences, but certainly there's an audience that I'm always interested in as I'm conducting the interviews and talking through these questions with my guests, and that is, our undergraduates or our students who might be entering from high school and transitioning into college. And so, when I was making that transition, I was 18 years old, and I've received a lot of advice, and I'm sure you received advice too. So let's go back to the 1900s. In building off of your sense of optimism, if knowing what you know now, your experience, what advice would you have for 19 or 20-year-old, 18, 19, 20-year-old Heather?
So 18, 19, 20-year-old Heather was like hedging her bets.
She was.
Yeah, she was like really nervous about this. And I think that's why I do what I do, because I think at the time I didn't see the path forward. Like I didn't see a sustainable path forward in the arts. And so that's why I was a double major at Brown. I didn't go to an art school. Um, and I think if I could look, I mean, she did what she needed to do. So I'm not gonna like, I'm not gonna tell her to do anything else. And I learned stuff along the way and it's all good. I don't regret any of it. But I feel like if someone could have told me like there are ways of doing this, or like an artist's life is not that solitary genius. It doesn't have to be a solitary life where it's all about you. Like there are all these other options for you. Like I think I would have been so much more comfortable with the idea of going into the arts. It took me many years to like really be comfortable with the idea of being in the arts, because the path is so, there are just so many paths and it's just so blurry as to what could possibly happen, because there's no set um, checklist of the things you have, and maybe you think there are, but there aren't. And so I guess just I would have just told her that there is a path for you. It might not be the one you think. And just
That,
let it happen.
that's great advice. Would she have listened to you?
No, never. She doesn't really listen to anybody. No, that's not true, but maybe. I don't think she would have listened.
Well, I think
Anyway.
I think 18, 19, 20-year-old Heather did pretty well for herself.
Yeah, I worked it out.
Yes.
Which I mean, maybe that's the advice. You're going to work it out. Just enjoy yourself along the
Mhm.
way. There are lots of times where I didn't enjoy myself when I should have been like enjoying it. Yeah.
Both pieces of that answer are fantastic. Great
Okay.
advice. So Heather, look, I have so enjoyed this conversation with you. The way I like to end these interviews is with a series of questions. And so now that we're back in the 1900s, we're going to come back to Penn State as well. And so, although your responses may have originated from your time at Penn State, certainly, nostalgia sometimes modifies how we think about where we were and who we were. But at any rate, enough of the preface for this. I'm going to ask you just a series of questions, and we're going to run them down them one. You ready?
Okay. All right.
Okay, ready? Who is one person? I mean, you've already mentioned several people, but who is one person of influence to you during your time as a graduate student at Penn State?
Okay, I can't do one. So I'm going to say three, and then I'm going to miss a whole bunch of people. So the biggest ones were Michaela Amato, Helen O'Leary, and Robert Yarber.
Great. All valid answers. We'll take all three answers. Okay. What was your favorite place on campus?
The Creamery.
Okay. Now that we're at the Creamery, for the next question, what's your favorite flavor?
Strawberry.
Strawberry. Also a correct answer. I'd also like to let you know any Creamery flavor is the correct answer.
Yeah.
Where did you live when you were at Penn State?
Oh gosh, I lived in a dorm. I lived at which I'm not going to remember the name of. It's like right around the curve, like right near the arts buildings. It's like that across from the Nittany Lion. I don't remember what it was called.
Across from the Nittany Lion.
It's across from the Lion.
Oh, right. I know
curve.
where it is. I am blanking on the name of those. But
I think it's across from a gym, which I never used. But I feel like athletic people were going into a place across from me also.
Athletic people were probably going into rec hall.
Yeah, that was probably right.
Okay, good. All right. Now, we've already talked about advice. The last question is, if you had one piece of advice to give to an incoming Penn State student, what would it be? Would it be that advice you gave to 18, 19, 20-year-old Heather?
Yeah, just like, and you're gonna find a way to do it. So just be resilient. And I loved living in a dorm on campus, like as a Penn State student. I really enjoyed the whole thing, and like going back and forth to the art building so close. Like my life was in that tiny little stretch, and the creamery was not too far away. And so that was my life. And I did really like buckle down, and I learned, I sucked that's my advice. Okay, I've got it. Like, to suck every bit of knowledge out of the people that you're around, because it doesn't happen again. It's like school is just such a, and this is the nostalgia and like pretending that I was a different person then, but like the school is such a special time with all these special people who are so smart, and they're paid to tell you things. So like that's not really going to happen again. So just like suck it all up while you can.
That's great advice. Great advice. Heather, Darcy, Bhandari, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Great.